Thank you so much for joining us today. Can you hear me? Is the sound sufficient? Great. This is such a happy occasion for us. We were just delighted at the confluence of Arbor Day with Olmsted's 191st birthday. Happy birthday, Frederick. This was the day we thought to plant our tree. Many of you shared with us the sad days of the decline and ultimate removal of our historic Olmsted elm, which was taken down March 30, 2011. And today we plant a young tree. Look at that, it's just bursting with early leaves, eager to be placed in its new home. This tree began its life 3 years ago, as our beloved historic tree was in its final year. Our new tree is Dutch elm disease tolerant and is a Jefferson elm, a cultivar developed by the National Park Service and the U.S. National Arboretum. Now, Frederick Law Olmsted was known in his day as long-headed. Isn't that a great 19th century term? I think we know what it means. It means he was far-sighted and was able to envision early in the design process how a landscape would look far into the future, and confident that it would develop into the beautiful maturity that he envisioned. Today, I invite you to join with us as we flex our own visionary muscles and give this young tree the best and happiest send-off we can in its journey towards maturity. Our program features participants spanning the generations and spanning the professions as we express today our collective stewardship of this and other Olmsted landscapes and pass the baton of stewardship of this and all the landscapes to the younger generations who have their representatives here with us today. Let me introduce the special friends who are helping us mark this occasion. Lauren Meyer, to my right, is a landscape architect and former president of the Friends of Fairsted. And as a National Park Service employee, she oversaw the restoration of this landscape in the 1990s. Jerry Wright is a devotee of Olmsted. There's a lot to say about Jerry. I tried to get it down to just a few things. A playwright and dramatic interpreter of the man Olmsted, and co-founder of Olmsted 2022, about which we'll be speaking more later. Paula Robeson, to my right, is a renowned flutist and our cherished neighbor who has developed a deep love for Olmsted and for this particular landscape. And when the planting begins, my colleague Liza Stearns, who is here though somewhere, there she is, an education specialist for our 3 sites, great distinction I might add, will introduce those who are planting and those who are reading wishes for the tree. And now we'll begin with Lauren.
Thank you, Myra, and greetings. Myra has asked me to give a few reflections on the Olmsted elm and the Fairsted landscape. So I'm going to read for you today a very personal reflection on this tree and this landscape. I have devoted much of my adult life to the study and preservation of the historic American landscape, and the Olmsted elm at Fairsted has contributed greatly to my understanding and appreciation of the complex interrelationship between humans and the natural environment and the art and science of landscape architecture. Frederick Law Olmsted has taught all students of landscape architecture that design is as much about the understanding of the character of an existing site as it is about the addition of new landscape features. The Olmsted elm is a case in point. Retained by FLO in 1883 as a relic of the earlier farmstead that in turn formed the principal organizing element as this new landscape took shape. Fairsted is in many ways the best example of Olmsted's approach to a small residential landscape. It contains all of the key elements he advocated to create an ideal design for domesticity, such as an indefiniteness of edge and the complete subordination of the parts to the whole to achieve an effect of natural scenery. He wrote that this may be accomplished by so bringing together materials of varied, graceful forms and pleasing tints that will intimately mingle, and this with such intricate plan of light and shade that the whole body of them is under close observation. The eye is not drawn to dwell upon, nor the mind be occupied with details. Certainly the light canopy, dappled shade, and graceful arching limbs of this American elm achieved many of the principles Olmsted recommended. A century after Olmsted settled on Warren Street, I came to Boston first to study landscape architecture at Harvard, and later in 1991 to direct the restoration of the grounds here at the Olmsted National Historic Site. Through the next decade, I grew to appreciate Olmsted's careful decision to save this tree, and I marveled at its perseverance through a century of change, including the construction and deconstruction of a swimming pool that was over here. In the early days of the Olmsted Center for Landscape Preservation, Charlie Pepper led the program to propagate historically significant plant material, and the elm was a natural candidate to inaugurate that effort. It served as an important case study to evaluate strategies for plant selection, retention, and replacement in historic landscapes. So its own contribution to the field of historic preservation has been noteworthy, and the elm lives on in articles and the memories of the horticulturists who participated. The loss of the Olmsted elm was like losing a friend and a mentor. It is the single most significant element in the Fairsted landscape, but as time, old age, and disease ravaged the tree, the necessary removal of its main limbs and sparse foliage were an indication that it was in serious decline. As is true in all designed landscapes, unlike historic architecture, the dynamics and cycle of plant change, growth, death, and then replacement are ever present. But for me, the circle is not and will not be complete until this Jefferson elm grows sufficiently to reclaim its place as a central feature in the Fairsted landscape. I look forward to its arching branches that will grace Fairsted well into the next century. Thank you.
Thank you, Myra, and all members of the National Park Service who've made this day possible. Thank you for Friends of Fairsted for helping to make this day possible. Thank you for all the individuals and other organizations that have helped to make this day possible. I was asked in an earlier interview, how would Olmsted feel if he were standing here? As an emotional person, although we didn't often see it in his life, if he were standing in the back, I think he would probably have a tear coming down his cheek for his son, Rick. He carried on exactly the work that his father had envisioned. He wrote the legislation for the National Park Service, and he traveled across America in his father's footsteps. Now I want to say something about where the pride in the family went the other direction with his grandfather. His grandfather was a sea captain, and he fought in the Revolution. And Olmsted used to listen with great intent and great curiosity and great pride when he heard the stories of his grandfather, both at sea and in the land, as his grandfather fought for the independence. And truly, Olmsted was a Democrat, an American Democrat at the core. These are words that Olmsted wrote in an experience with his grandfather. One day, I was lying with my head between the roots of a lofty elm, looking up at its swaying boughs and leafage, when grandfather came out of the house and hobbled toward me. It must have been a Sunday or holiday, for he was dressed in his best, ruffles on his bosom and wrists, small clothes, stockings, and silver-buckled shoes, a long silver-headed Malacca cane as a walking stick. He wore a hat of the then common fashion of real beaver fur. I rose as he approached, and he asked, looking up, "Did I not think it was a fine tree?" Then he told me that he himself had planted this tree when a boy. Others nearby he had helped to plant, but this one was all his own. And he described to me how he had dug it in the swamp and had brought it on his shoulder and had been allowed to plant it all by himself. It came to me after a time, as he went on talking about it, that there had been nothing in all his long life of which he was so frankly proud and in which he took such complete pleasure as the planting and the beautiful growth of this tree. Let the planting begin.
I want to start by thanking that wonderful planting, and I want to just point out the people who are involved in that. We have BC. Do you want to take a bow? BC from the Lincoln School first grade. We have Jamie, also Kinnear from the Lincoln School third grade. Thank you, Jamie. We have Uriah Williams, one of our branching out youth who's been working on learning about turf management and arboriculture and horticulture. And her partner here, Stephanie Benitez, also from branching out. Thank you so much. I want to thank you really on behalf of the National Park Service for getting this wonderful elm tree started for a life of greatness. Thank you so much. And now it's my pleasure to introduce to you Henry and Jillian Goddard, also from the Lincoln School. And they have brought down for us 10 wishes from the Lincoln School students. They worked with Deb Abner, who I see back there. 4th, 5th, and 6th graders all sat down on Monday and Tuesday of this week and thought about their wishes for the Olmsted Elm. They sent down 87 wishes and left it up to us in the National Park Service to choose 10 that represented the whole suite of wishes from the Lincoln School. And I give to you Henry and Jillian Goddard.
I wish that the tree goes tall and strong and brings shade and comfort as so many others have before. I wish for this tree to have as long and as good a life as the other tree. I wish that Frederick Law Olmsted would come back to life, see the tree, and smile a big smile. I wish that the tree will one day grow to become a giant, and that its young will spread around the world. I wish that this new tree will grow 1 inch taller, 1 year longer, and 1,000 times stronger than our old Olmsted elm.
I wish for the new tree to match the beauty of the rest of the Olmsted Park. I wish the new tree will be awesome, providing space, peace, making shade, and making people happy. I wish our new tree to flourish, grow as big and strong as the last, and give all that our old elm gave us. I wish for you to be cared for and to care for us. I wish for the tree to go big, strong, and always have people to love and care for. I wish for the tree to grow healthy and stay around long enough so that my children's children will be able to see it.
Just wanted to play a musical wish to the tree. This is the hymn Morning is Broken. Well, a tree so lovingly planted and so beautifully blessed with wishes, musical and poetic, can only flourish in its new home. Here's to the tree. recognize some special guests who have joined us in the audience today. Many are old friends, some are new ones. We welcome all of them and all of you as part of the extended family of Frederick Law Olmsted National Historic Site. I believe that Nick Clemens, District Director for Congressman Joe Kennedy, has arrived. Thank you. I don't know if Norman Birnbaum is here. Wonderful. We're so glad to have you both. Norman is an aide to Senator Elizabeth Warren, and we have letters from both of them on this auspicious occasion. I'd like to recognize Tony Pollack, who is the Commissioner of Parks and Recreation for the City of Boston, who brings a proclamation from the Mayor of Boston, which is about Olmsted and also about Olmsted 2022. Today's occasion, there's Tony over there. And she's standing right next to Erin Shute-Galentine, who is Director of Parks and Open Space for the town of Brooklyn. Welcome to you. Tony has brought a proclamation, as I started to say, from the Mayor of Boston about Olmsted and Olmsted 22, and today's occasion is a soft kickoff for the stimulating events that Olmsted 2022 is offering this weekend, beginning with a symposium tomorrow at Simmons College on Frederick Law Olmsted and climate change. There is literature about this over on one of the tables, and strongly recommend that you consider attending. It's going to be extremely interesting. And if you can't make tomorrow, I hope you will think about different ways in which you can contribute to this sort of groundswell movement, which is Olmsted 2022, the gentleman's 200th birthday. Patrice Kish is also here, from the Director of the Office of Cultural Resources for the Massachusetts Department of Conservation and Recreation. And Patrice has brought us a proclamation from the Governor. Isn't it wonderful to have all these splendid documents here? I'm not quite sure where Patrice is at the moment, but, oh, wait. But they are all over on the table for you to go to inspect and feel proud of. Glad that you're associated with this occasion. We'd also like to recognize Janine Knox, who is Director of External Relations for the Emerald Necklace Conservancy. And we also have here, I don't know if Janine is still here, we also have members of the Conservancy's Youth Leadership Program. And we're delighted to have them with us. I'm not sure, did Ned Friedman arrive? He did. Wonderful, and there he is. Wonderful. Ned, Director of the Arnold Arboretum. We're so delighted to have you here today. We spent a lot of years, before Ned was at the Arnold, we spent a lot of years trying to propagate the old Olmsted elm in partnership with the Arnold Arboretum. Unfortunately, most of the clones, all of the clones, either failed to thrive or themselves developed Dutch elm disease. And last, but hardly least, first in our hearts certainly, is Henry Lucas here? There he is. Henry Lucas, the current president of the Friends of Fairsted. I'd like to thank Henry and the entire organization for their dedication to this site and for the many things that they do to support this park, including something you're going to be able to enjoy momentarily, which are the delicious refreshments and birthday cake that we hope you will stay around and relish. Here it is. We have party favors. So we want you to pick up an elm in a box, an American elm, a tree in a box, and find an appropriate place to plant it in your lives and to cherish it and to remember Arbor Day and remember Frederick Law Olmsted National Historic Site. There will be a tour of the site at 5 o'clock for those who are interested. And now, please enjoy cake, no champagne.
So nobody hide behind the tree. Oh, you're eating cake. You're good. That's a smart person. All right, everybody.
Got a 10.
Let's see. I'm going to get back a little bit here. Perfect. I know very few of your names, I apologize. But, Jamie, all right. Jamie, and everyone here, we're going to take you just a small step over. Perfect. Right about there. And that's right here. Pause it. You right. Bring you a little. Oh, this one. Yep. So now we don't want a gap in between. So everyone now just perfect. Right there. Beautiful, everybody. So you're going to be looking right here. And in a second, I'm going to make sure you can see my camera. Excellent. Everyone can see this. I can see. Perfect. Hold that, and here we go. 3, 2, 1. And big smile. Perfect.
Did I get in your shot? I hope not.
Oh, a few times he got in.
Oh, sorry.
Don't worry. No.
Good afternoon. My name is Erin Galentine. I'm the Director of Parks and Open Space in Brookline, Massachusetts. And today, we are gathered here today at Fairsted in Brookline, Massachusetts to celebrate the anniversary of Frederick Law Olmsted's birth with the planting of an elm tree. And we've just had a lovely celebration here with friends from near and far that love this site, are incredibly appreciative of, sorry, we're gonna have to cut that. So in Brookline, we're very appreciative of all of our parks and open spaces, and in particular of having the office and home of Frederick Law Olmsted here. So it's a wonderful day that we're celebrating this tree planting that will grace generations to come.
That's actually good.
Can't miss that. So in 20 years, you'll have a tree. No, three. Yeah, three. Can you tell me that? Someone told me it was three. Wasn't me, but I know it. I know that.
Do you want to comment? Want to say anything about today's events to BATV? I would have to get you.
What a beautiful day. A lot of people are here, a lot of nice people actually. And we listened to a flutist, and it was just beautiful. I especially liked her walking around the new tree, which should grow very, very tall and strong and be fit in right with the neighborhood.
And your name, please.
Ed Needell.
Thank you.
I live around the corner.
My name is Mark Swartz, and I am a National Park Service Ranger at Frederick Law Olmsted National Historic Site here in Brookline. And I have been with the Park Service for 14 years. And just about all of that time, in fact, all of that time in Brookline, briefly with John F. Kennedy National Historic Site, the JFK birthplace on Beale Street, and for the majority of the time right here at 99 Warren Street, at Fairsted, which was the home and office of Frederick Law Olmsted from 1883 to 1895. And you know, this is an important day for us, April 26th, both as the anniversary of Frederick Law Olmsted's birth in 1822, but also today as the day that we return an American elm to our historic landscape here. For many years, in fact, from before the time even Frederick Law Olmsted moved here, there was a grand American elm that was just a short distance behind me, in fact, where this new elm is standing now. There was a grand old elm that Olmsted kept as an important element in his designed landscape here on what is the south lawn. It was a focal point for people entering the lawn. It provided sort of interesting shadow patterns on the grass. And there was a certain grandness to this tree and to elms in general. They offer a vase shape that's sort of classic on the American landscape. There were elms planted really throughout America in the 19th and early 20th centuries before they began to fall victim to Dutch elm disease, which did eventually affect this tree along with a fungal disease. And in 2011, we had to remove the historic Olmsted elm because it posed a threat to the structure, to the historic house behind me, and also potentially to people who were out on the landscape. So the past 2 years, we've been looking forward to this day where we would again reintroduce an American elm to this landscape. We originally had hoped to take cuttings from the Olmsted elm, propagate them, and use one of them as the replacement elm, but those were unsuccessful. Those cuttings did not thrive, and several of them showed signs of Dutch elm disease, and we weren't able to plant one. So we instead took a young specimen tree of a Jefferson elm, which is a new cultivated variety of American elm that has shown disease tolerance. In other words, an ability to survive in a world in which there is Dutch elm disease. It's derived from a tree on the Washington National Mall in D.C., which happens to be a landscape with Olmsted connections. It's a landscape that Frederick Law Olmsted Jr. had a role in his position with the Macmillan Commission in 1901, which helped plan the next century of parks and the monumental core of Washington, D.C. So this tree that's here today, you could say, is an offspring of that tree on the National Mall, and we hope it's a tree that will grace this landscape for decades, if not centuries.
Thank you.
Let's get a picture of the tree, shall we? Yeah. How long is it going to take before it starts putting they are?
I mean, like 100 feet tall?
3 years. I have very pale face for a while. Do you want to see the ring? Oh, he did. He bought it. He bought it at the nursery a month ago.
Yes. Wow.
We wanted to go near Park High,
Okay.
and it was sold out.
Okay.
How did I get my tickets earlier?
What are you doing now?
Why do you buy the concert starting? I figured it was sunny.
I've been looking for an expert gymnastics coach. Rent, board at a state house out in Western Concord. And I love to go out in the woods. And there's a road off of our main road, which the main road is Strawberry Hill Road, and this is called Lady Slippery Lane.
Careful
I
around
thought,
the wall.
there must be. So yeah, I started hiking around last weekend, in fact, hiking around this woods, there's a wet forest, spring cabbage, and I found one patch of one species.
That's a good idea.
But you know, the sort of pink and swan, and yellow one, and white one.
This is my spot right here.
So I guess it wasn't cool. I pick them up and sold them on eBay. Just joking, just joking. I'll find out in a couple of weeks. Actually, I'm actually leaving tomorrow.
Yeah, so Stephanie, are you okay area for the planting part?
I do. Tell them about the I'm sure. Send me your CV and I'll show the owners of the company. Yeah?
Quick question. When BC and Jamie come, do I move out?
Great fun.
Or they come on my side?
Back in 77.
BC and Jamie come?
She didn't need to go to her place, and you're going to need to come to your place.
No, this is collecting. But the 2 weeks. Well, for 2 weeks, expenses crazy. I'll put you on my blog list.
Bring her right in front of the microphone.
I was looking up, I don't know why, well, I do know why.
Yeah, I was kind of curious just if there's information about our street, right? Takes a sort of that out.
And can the tree lean the other way?
Okay, watch the top of the tree.
I work with a botanist.